Thank you very much for inviting me to present for your upcoming conference in March. And I wish that I could be there, but circumstances prevail. But look, I hope it's really successful. From the carbon management perspective, for all those people attending, and in particular students, it's such a valuable, invaluable new discipline. Understanding carbon management in company operations is starting to have much more presence. We're seeing various new accounting standards being developed, which stipulate to organisations what have you done to prepare for climate change risk? What have you done in your sustainability disclosure section of your operations? So there's more focus on the environment, which I think is like absolutely critical. Currently, if we just focus on the carbon side of things, the global carbon emissions last year in 2022 calendar year were about 51 gigatons. We have a carbon budget to stay at 1.5 degrees warming, and for last year it was meant to be no more than 25 gigatons. So we were 26 gigatons shy, and it looks like that in this year the emissions are going to be of a similar amount. So we can probably say goodbye to 1.5 degrees warming, but I believe that the increase in severity and frequency of natural disaster will probably promote the concept that we need to do something really quickly to reduce carbon emissions, and that's the key factor here. So in understanding how we can reduce carbon emissions, how we can adopt that into our company operations profitably. I mean, my company's called EcoProfit. The reason is that invariably you can reduce your carbon emissions while at the same time benefiting or helping ecology, which is the beauty, really, in a sense, of carbon management. And I'll give you an example. Wherever we're introducing energy efficiency measures, we're invariably not only cutting carbon emissions, but we're also saving money for our company. And the other thing too that's really interesting when you bring in these various programs with companies and so forth, in terms of identifying where their carbon emissions are and how to reduce them and so forth, is that employees also see, hey, these guys really care, and I've noticed that there's a real pickup in morale for companies that are really proactive in reducing their carbon emissions. So there's another benefit in the revenue stream in terms of, I guess, the work ethic and everything else, because people like to be part of what you're doing. So it's a sort of a good news story to be involved in this. The other thing that's really interesting too is when you're doing carbon accounting is you're digging down to find out where the carbon emissions are, and in the you're looking at the processes and efficiency of them, and invariably you come across disconnects in the actual processes that exist. So you're actually got a chance to look at how your company's functioning, how it's operating, and the communication between departments, and all of that comes into play. And of course, in carbon accounting, communication between departments is critical. And the better it is, the more everyone knows what they're doing, we're all on the same page. But it's just also finding out the deficiencies in your data collection systems, your data processes, and just general, runs, the way your vehicles are put out on their operational runs, whatever it may be, whether it's a process line or not, there's opportunities there to find out more about how you can be more efficient in your operations. The other thing too is the elephant in the room. Well, there's two elephants in the room strategically, really. One is the fact that there's a lot of rules out there about what should be included in the carbon footprint, and there's a lot of companies out there that just ignore it, And what's the term? They do it at their own peril. Best to figure out where you're up to, and that means really understanding your supply chain, in particular your Scope 3 emissions upstream, and in some senses, in many cases, too, in your downstream carbon emissions with your customers, depending on the type of operation. In some cases, that's more important. But the thing is that here in that Scope 3 emissions chain is a wealth, if that's the right word, a huge amount of carbon emissions, embedded emissions, and there's all sorts of rules that are saying that we, as we buy from suppliers, we should be including those emissions in our carbon footprint. So have we tried to communicate with our suppliers? Have we started to engage with them? And lo and behold, when you start engaged with them, you start to find out other options, other products, other supply chains, other everythings that you didn't realize existed as you explore what's happening in your purchases. So I can only say it's a win-win situation with carbon accounting. It's a climate-rated risk and sustainability risk type reduction process. It's a process where you can potentially earn a lot more profits, either that be from the overheads from your P&L or from your revenue streams to your P&L. So in the end of the day, I recommend companies getting their head around carbon management, because it's going to strengthen their balance sheets. At Eco Profit, we sort of want the sort of one-stop shopping. If we're not not experts in a particular area, because it's such a vast and wide, ever-changing field, if we're not the experts, we have the experts there in whatever it is. So what we want to be able to do is, if a company comes to us and they say to us, we want to be, for instance, be net zero. So how do we calculate our carbon emissions? How do we identify where those emissions are occurring within our operation? How do we educate our staff and in what needs to be happening? How do we select the right technology? How do we build a business case for doing upgrades? And we have a unique tool called a return on investment carbon calculator. And basically, it's quite complicated, but basically the end result of it is you get a graph, and on the vertical axis is the return on investment on the selected upgrade, whether that could be renewables, lighting, EVs, HVAC, variable speed drive, whatever it is. We calculate the return on investment, and on the horizontal axis is the tons of CO2e saved. So we were interested, if we're going to do things, we want to make sure we get a good return. We want to select the most opportune type option, and certainly the amount of carbon emissions that we can take out off the plate in our operations from either Scope 1 or Scope 2 emissions perspective, and in some cases Scope 3, the better. And certainly, we even have built in the cost of carbon offsets where it's applicable, into those calculations, where if you need to be offsetting Scope 1, Scope 2, and even Scope 3 emissions, then in the return on investment calculations, we've put in the costs of offsets that now don't have to be purchased. So that's an option for that calculator too. But really, it's all about, let's figure out where the action is in a company, what's causing the greatest amount of emissions. Let's get to the bottom of it, and slowly but surely. Scope 1 and 2 emissions are more mathematical too. We go to Scope 3, we're now going into much more people-orientated type arrangements, because we want to engage with our suppliers for a start, and potentially want to engage with our customers as well. So that's where it takes on a more nuanced approach. And I guess Eco Profit's sort of underlying mantra is rush slowly. Let's give our suppliers and customers, give them time. Let's put them on notice where we stand as a company, and that we expect and I'm talking on behalf of clients here, what we expect of our customers, our suppliers, and I think in some cases what we expect of customers, but mostly, look, this is what we're really doing. You can be proud to buy our products. And of course, it gets down to that sort of risk analysis that's incorporated in all this carbon management. And that's another thing we do. We actually do climate risk analysis, identify the risk and assess it, and look to put in options that will be financially beneficial for all.